About a year ago, Gianni Infantino stood on a stage in Miami, looked directly into a camera, and said something that has not aged particularly well. He said the World Cup would flip the country upside down, and then back up, and then back down again. That phrase, flip the country upside down, was meant to describe something close to a national awakening. Cities transformed by color and noise, stadiums overflowing with first-time believers, millions of Americans discovering what the rest of the planet has known for generations, that this sport, this game, has a hold on people that almost nothing else can replicate. And some of what Infantino described is real. There are packed fan zones. There is genuine electricity in the host cities, where football has finally, undeniably arrived. The football itself has been, as football at this level almost always is, genuinely compelling, beautiful at moments, tense in ways that no other sport can quite manufacture, real. But flip the country upside down. Just before the tournament kicked off, the social media analytics firm Quid published a comprehensive assessment of the fan sentiment landscape surrounding FIFA 2026. Their finding was precise, and it is worth paying close attention to. The emotional landscape surrounding this tournament, they reported, is unusually balanced. Positive words, proud, ready, excited, favorite team, appear prominently across the data. And so do negative ones: scam, worry, fear, concern, worst World Cup, geopolitical scandal. Unusually balanced. That is not the description of a country swept up in football fever. That is the description of a tournament that has generated genuine excitement and genuine grievance simultaneously, in roughly equal measure, across the same audience. And that balance, the coexistence of real joy and real anger, is the actual story of this World Cup, now that it is underway. Let's start with the joy, because it is real, and it deserves its proper place in this story. The opening ceremony at the Estadio Azteca in Mexico City was everything it was supposed to be. Shakira performing in front of 83,000 people. The Azteca, the most storied football venue in the Americas, dressed for its third World Cup opening ceremony. The noise, the color, the slow, undeniable realization for the millions watching on screens around the world that the tournament that had been surrounded by controversy for months was now simply, powerfully here, present, happening. Mexico's opening match against South Africa carried extra emotional weight because of the history. Back in 2010, that exact fixture opened the first World Cup ever held on African soil. Now it opened the first North American World Cup in 32 years. On a pitch that had hosted Pelé and Maradona and every generation of Mexican football greatness since 1966. The atmosphere inside that stadium was extraordinary, and the fan response in host cities has been more positive than some of the hotel occupancy projections suggested it would be. The Los Angeles Fan Festival, which opened on June 12th at Exposition Park, drew significant crowds in its opening weekend. The FIFA Fan Festival has become, according to the host committee, the heartbeat of the tournament experience in Los Angeles. And early turnout numbers suggest that is not simply official promotional language. On the pitch, the football has produced genuine talking points. Japan's performance, carefully watched by everyone who remembered Qatar 2022 when they knocked out Germany and Spain, has been exactly as competitive as the wary had feared. The early group stage results threw up surprises that no pre-tournament prediction managed to capture. And the players, the ones who carried years of preparation to this tournament, who overcame injury scares and squad uncertainty and selection drama, are playing with an intensity that matches the scale of the occasion. All of that is true, and it deserves to be said clearly, without qualification. But here is what is also true, and what those Quid sentiment numbers are actually measuring. Before a single ball was kicked, before a single whistle blew, FIFA released the official World Cup song, not the Shakira anthem that will be remembered from the opening ceremony. The very first track linked to the FIFA 2026 rollout was a song by Jelly Roll called Lighter. It was described as marking a deliberate shift away from global pop sounds toward a more country-influenced style, a choice that was framed as reflecting the tournament's American host. That shift, in the words of football fans across every major social media platform, did not land well. The reaction was blunt. Fans began comparing Lighter to previous World Cup anthems, Waka Waka, La Copa de la Vida, Woven Flag, and finding it wanting not just stylistically, but conceptually. The central question asked repeatedly in comment sections across the internet was direct. How does a country music track fit a global football event watched by people in 190 countries, the vast majority of whom have never encountered that genre as part of their cultural experience? It is a small thing. One song. In isolation, it would barely register in the larger story of a World Cup. But it does not exist in isolation. It sits alongside the halftime show announcement for the final, Madonna, Shakira, and BTS, produced by Coldplay's Chris Martin, and the hydration breaks introduced during matches that function, at least in part, as commercial windows. It sits alongside the controversial water bottle ban that required public reversal under pressure from players and coaches, alongside the vuvuzela ban that removed the instrument that defined the sound of South Africa 2010 from World Cup grounds entirely. Each of these decisions, taken individually, has a defensible rationale. Taken collectively, they tell a consistent and unmistakable story about the direction this tournament is heading, the direction of an American entertainment product rather than a global football event. Now here's the thing that Quid's data is actually capturing. Football fans are not ignoring this tournament because of any of that. They are watching. The viewership numbers are strong. Discussion volumes surged significantly across May and early June, with several major spikes tracking key fixtures and announcements. 46% of the social media content being generated around the tournament is image-based. 28% is video. Fans are engaging with highlight clips, merchandise drops, venue previews, and fan-generated content at a scale that no previous World Cup has matched. The Statista survey found that among Americans who are aware of the tournament, 39% say the official sponsors are in their good books, a reasonable approval figure for a country where football is not the dominant sporting culture. But the same survey found that 44% of Americans do not trust FIFA to manage transparency and fairness at this tournament, nearly half. Not the disengaged fringe, not people who tuned out. People who know about the World Cup are actively following it, and simultaneously do not trust the organization running it. That combination, watching but not trusting, engaged but scrutinizing, is the new normal for any major FIFA tournament. And the 2026 edition has produced it at a scale and intensity that no previous World Cup has quite matched. To understand how FIFA arrived at this place, you have to go back further than this tournament. You have to go back to 2015, when the organization was exposed in a corruption scandal of genuinely staggering proportions. Federal agents moving through a Zurich hotel at dawn, officials arrested in their rooms, years of accumulated bribery, over television rights, over tournament hosting votes, over commercial deals woven through every layer of the sport's global administration. The Department of Justice indictment named dozens of individuals and described a system where corruption was not an aberration. It was the operating model. Sepp Blatter, FIFA's president for 17 years, was suspended from the organization he had built into a financial empire. His deputy, Michel Platini, was banned alongside him. Dozens of officials across multiple confederations faced criminal charges. The total amount of bribes identified in U.S. federal proceedings ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars, and the damage to the credibility of world football's governing body was, at that moment, nearly total. Gianni Infantino arrived as the reform candidate, a Swiss-Italian administrator who had run the UEFA bureaucracy with efficiency and relative anonymity. Infantino positioned himself explicitly as the man who would clean up FIFA. He won the presidency in February of 2016 at a special election called after Blatter's suspension. His message was transparency, accountability, a new FIFA. And in his early years, some of that language was backed by structural changes, new ethics frameworks, new disclosure requirements, new processes for bid evaluations. But a decade on, the picture is considerably more complicated. Former FIFA president João Havelang's era represented one kind of corruption. The Blatter era represented another. And the critics of the Infantino era, and there are many, including other former FIFA officials, argue that what has changed is not the concentration of power, but merely its location. In February of 2026, Infantino's political neutrality was called into formal question when he awarded Donald Trump the FIFA Peace Prize, a a formal ethics complaint was filed, alleging repeated breaches of FIFA's duty of neutrality. The complaint did not result in sanctions, but it did result in something arguably more revealing: a public debate about whether FIFA's ethics enforcement infrastructure is capable of holding FIFA's president accountable at all. Former FIFA president Sepp Blatter, who remains legally embroiled with the organization despite being in his late 80s, gave an interview to Politico in early 2026. His assessment of the current state of the organization was unambiguous. FIFA, he said, is a dictatorship. The FIFA Council, with close to 40 members, has nothing to say. That is a remarkable statement from a man whose own presidency was defined by authoritarian control. It is the kind of statement that, under different circumstances, would generate extensive coverage and serious institutional response. Under current circumstances, it was noted, debated briefly, and absorbed into the ongoing background noise of FIFA governance controversy. The backdrop to all of this is a tournament that was already carrying more geopolitical weight than any World Cup in recent memory. Co-hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico, three countries whose relationship had been significantly destabilized by trade policy in the months leading up to the tournament, FIFA 2026 arrived into a diplomatic context that even the most carefully worded promotional material could not fully paper over. The visa issue alone produced documented real-world consequences. Fans from multiple countries found themselves unable to obtain visas to enter the United States in time to attend matches. Some national team supporters traveled to Mexico City, where visa restrictions were less prohibitive, and watched their teams compete on screens in stadiums they were formally excluded from entering. That is not an abstraction. That is the experience of real people who saved money, made plans, booked travel, and arrived at a bureaucratic wall they had no way to scale. And those people, and the communities they represent, are part of the audience of this World Cup, whether FIFA's marketing language is designed to include them or not. There is also something happening beneath the surface of the fan experience that deserves direct attention, something that does not show up in viewership numbers or fan festival turnout figures. Health authorities confirmed in early June that wastewater surveillance, the tracking of disease markers in stadium sewage systems, is being actively deployed across World Cup venues to detect early signs of infectious disease outbreaks among the fan population, not as a reactive measure following a confirmed illness, as a proactive, precautionary system applied across multiple host cities simultaneously. A public health team based in Washington, D.C., anchored by Georgetown University's Center for Global Health Science and Security, is running the operation under the direction of epidemiologist Rebecca Katz. The system monitors for a range of pathogens including respiratory viruses, norovirus, and other biological markers that would indicate the presence of illness spreading through a concentrated population. The technology uses DNA and RNA sequencing to identify microbial genetic material without requiring traditional laboratory culture, meaning it can detect signals faster and from a wider range of sources than conventional disease surveillance. The team is receiving wastewater data from collection sites across the United States and Canada, cross-referencing it with anonymized electronic health records and monitoring open-source social media for early indicators of transmission clusters. Daily status reports are being prepared and distributed to hospital emergency managers and public health officials at local, state, federal, and international levels, as well as directly to FIFA itself. The context matters here. This World Cup arrives in the immediate aftermath of an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo that prompted a CDC travel restriction order. It arrives months after an H1N1 outbreak on a cruise ship raised fresh questions about mass gathering health preparedness. And it arrives in a public health environment permanently shaped by the experience of the COVID pandemic, an environment in which the infrastructure for large-scale health surveillance at major events has been normalized in ways that would have seemed extraordinary 10 years ago. The wastewater surveillance program is a sensible measure. It is proportionate. The people running it are serious professionals trying to protect millions of fans and the communities that host them. But its presence is also a reminder of something worth sitting with. The 2026 World Cup is the first major global sporting event to arrive fully embedded in a world of permanent mass health monitoring. The fans filing into stadiums in Los Angeles, Houston, Toronto, and Kansas City are, without necessarily knowing it, participants in a public health data collection system that will continue generating information long after the final whistle blows on July 19th. None of that is sinister. All of it is reasonable, but it is different from any previous World Cup, and that difference is part of the texture of what this tournament actually is, as distinct from what the press conferences and promotional videos described it as being. Here is where all of this has to land, honestly. The millions of fans who are not fully swept up in the moment are not a monolith. They are not all boycotting. They are not all angry. Many of them are watching from home because the tickets were simply too expensive. And that is not a political statement. It is a financial reality. Ticket prices for this tournament have drawn sustained criticism from supporters groups across Europe, Latin America, and Africa, who describe a pricing structure built around corporate hospitality and premium buyers rather than the fans who have followed these national teams for decades through qualifying campaigns and friendlies and tournaments that nobody else was watching. Many more fans are following the tournament on their phones because they do not have legal access to a broadcast deal. India's broadcast rights situation, still unresolved in the final days before the tournament opened, left hundreds of millions of people in one of the world's largest football-following populations, navigating unofficial streams and delayed highlights. This is not a fringe problem. It is a structural failure of global media rights management that FIFA, the richest football organization in history, has not resolved. And some of the people watching this tournament are fans from Ukraine, Senegal, Haiti, and Iran, fans watching on screens in countries they could not leave, or in diaspora communities scattered across cities where public gathering felt complicated, where their relationship to their national team exists in the middle of something much larger and much heavier than football. Those fans are feeling something genuinely complicated about cheering for their countries in a tournament staged by a country some of them could not enter, organized by a governing body whose relationship with power and money has never fully recovered from the scandals of 2015, and arguably was never meant to. That experience, the joy and the grief, the excitement and the exclusion, the watching and the not trusting, is not a narrative that FIFA's promotional apparatus is designed to contain or acknowledge, but it is the experience of millions of real people, and those people are the actual audience of this World Cup. The tournament is underway. The football is good. The atmosphere inside the stadiums that are full is everything a World Cup atmosphere should be. Loud and colorful, and occasionally transcendent in the way that only football at this scale can be. And somewhere in Mexico City, and in Lagos, and in Kiev, and in 100 other places, there are fans who could not be in the stadiums, watching on screens, feeling something complicated and real and entirely human about a sport they love, being hosted by a world they have complicated feelings about. All of that is true at the same time, unusually balanced. That is what Quid said. They were right.